Hello there. Whoever's watching this video right now, I want you to take a strong look at this photograph. I want you to look at all the boxes and crates stacked up in the storage centers and think about all the places that it will go and how it will get there. While you are watching this video, I want you to think about concepts tied into these three questions. Why is the trucking industry so necessary? What are the real costs to the logistics industry? And how do we fix the environment that we have been killing for so long? My name is Julian Huff, and I am an applied economics senior at the University of Minnesota. In this video, I will be explaining the three elements in relation to the topic of the trucking industry and its effect on the environment. The first element is the carbon dioxide emissions created by the industry. The second is the climate change and its role in the depreciation of the Earth's environment. And the third element is the solution process to improving human behavior and begin to rebuild the Earth's environment for years to come. Phase number one is the emissions. The trucking industry is the lifeblood of the U.S. economy. Over 70% of all freight and shipments are conducted over the road on a truck. This industry moves on average over 10.4 billion tons of freight every year. The fact is, without trucking, America stops moving. The problem is that per year it takes 38 billion gallons of gasoline to move all that freight. Diesel fluid turns into carbon dioxide by the mixing of carbon and gasoline with oxygen from the air. Gasoline consists of hydrocarbons. When those hydrocarbons burn in an automobile, the chains of carbon and hydrogen atoms break apart and recombine with air. This process produces a chemical byproduct of both water and carbon dioxide. About 22.4 pounds of CO2 is produced through the burning of 1 gallon of diesel fluid. If America uses 38 billion gallons of gasoline every year for its trucking industry, that means that there was over 851 billion pounds of CO2 being released into the air every year. Here is a picture explaining the emphasis America spends on different elements pertaining to carbon dioxide emissions in 2015. As you can see, transportation makes up a major part of the country's release of carbon emissions. This next photo shows a diagram of over a 200-year period, the amount of global carbon emissions being produced with every given year. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the growth has been exponential, and it has strongly affected our life as we know it today. The economy is what it is, and trucking is a very important part of the economy. The problem is, it doesn't come without a cost. Phase number two is climate change and its effect on the worldwide environment. The fact is that shipping costs a whole lot more than just money. According to NASA, carbon dioxide levels in the air are at its highest in 650,000 years. It is no secret that climate change has had an effect on the human population, but in order for us to change behavior, we must realize how detrimental our behavior has become. There are 5 indicators that expose the impact that climate change is having on the world. Number 1 is Arctic sea ice. Satellite images show areas covered in Arctic sea ice beginning to chip away, leaving these areas no longer inhabitable for animals such as polar bears. In 2012, Arctic sea ice shrank to its lowest extent on record, and at this rate it doesn't seem to be getting any better. Number 2 is sea surface temperature. Sensors and thermometers on ships show that temperature on sea level surface is increasing. By warming the temperature on the surface of the ocean, we are constantly causing a higher risk for natural disasters to occur, such as cyclones and hurricanes. This is a future nobody wants. Number 3 is global sea level. NASA satellites are detecting average increases of sea level at 3.4 millimeters per year for the past century. This is especially frightening due to the direct impact it can have on the infrastructure of human life along the coasts. These pictures show us a probability of a scary future. The 4th indicator is air temperature over land. Temperature in general fluctuates, but what is constant is the increasing average level of air temperature over the last century. Based off NASA's findings, 16 of the 17 warmest years on record in world history have occurred since 2001. The last indicator is the lack of snowfall and ice glaciers. Here's a photo that explains the difference climate change is having on the Arctic environment over a long period of time. The decreasing amount of snowfall and melting mountain glaciers having a negative effect on the agriculture of ecosystems that depend on snow for irrigation purposes. Alaska alone has fallen to an average of 19.4 inches per year. This is 30 inches less than what it was a century ago in 1916, and it is affecting the food supply in certain parts of Alaska. So yes, we may have all heard of climate change, but very few people actually recognize the true harm that human population is having on the environment. Here's a video from the National Geographic that explains more in depth the state of climate change in the world today.
For 2.5 million years, the Earth's climate has fluctuated, cycling from ice ages to warmer periods. But in the last century, the planet's temperature has risen unusually fast, about 1.2 to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists believe it's human activity that's driving the temperatures up, a process known as global warming. Ever since the Industrial Revolution began, factories, power plants, and eventually cars have burned fossil fuels such as oil and coal, releasing huge amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases trap heat near the Earth through a naturally occurring process called the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect begins with the sun and the energy it radiates to the Earth. The Earth and the atmosphere absorb some of this energy, while the rest is radiated back into space. Naturally occurring gases in the atmosphere trap some of this energy and reflect it back, warming the Earth. Scientists now believe that the greenhouse effect is being intensified by the extra greenhouse gases that humans have released. Evidence for global warming includes a recent string of very warm years. Scientists report that 1998 was the warmest year in measured history, with 2005 coming in second. Meanwhile, readings taken from ice cores show that the greenhouse gases carbon dioxide and methane have hit their highest levels in the past 420,000 years. Arctic sea ice is also shrinking. According to NASA studies, the extent of Arctic sea ice has declined about 10% in the last 30 years. As long as industrialized nations consume energy and developing countries increase their fossil fuel consumption, the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will continue to rise. Researchers predict that temperatures will increase about 2 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. What's less certain is what rising temperatures mean for the planet. Some climate models predict subtle changes. Others forecast rising sea levels which could flood coastal areas around the world. Weather patterns could change, making hurricanes more frequent. Severe droughts could become more common in warm areas, and species unable to adapt to the changing conditions would face extinction.
The last phase is the solution process. Given all of the information we have learned so far, the question still remains: how do we limit carbon dioxide emissions? The truth is, it won't be easy. It is going to take many changes by companies in the trucking industry over a long period of time to see any kind of growth. One thought would be to just send everything around by airplane. This would be a valid solution considering it would reduce CO2 emissions. The fact is that it would make logistics immensely more expensive and cause the majority of all shipment goods to be not worth buying. The other thought would be to send everything through railroad, but that is a process that would take too long and would not keep up with the time demand for goods in America today. The economy is limited in the variety of shipping options that can be used. I predict technology to catch up with the high demand for carbon efficient equipment, and sooner or later the trucking industry will become helpful for the environment. But for now, all we have is trucks. Though this mountain may seem hard to move, There are certain behavior changes that can be taking place in order to limit excess production of carbon emissions in the trucking industry. There are 5 current behavior modifications that can be made by trucking companies to help improve the environment. Number 1 is idling time. Much of truck drivers' time is spent idling at truck stops or wait stations. This is something that can be easily avoided by simply turning off the vehicle. Number 2 is speed reduction. For any single coast-to-coast trip, a driver can save thousands of dollars in fuel by choosing to drive at 65 miles per hour as opposed to 75. Saving fuel and carbon dioxide efficiency go hand in hand. Number 3 is aerodynamics. This is an attempt to alter the physical elements of the truck to make it more environmentally efficient, while also saving costs on fuel. Number 4 is route planning. Many times a dispatch will send a driver on the wrong route or less efficient route without realizing it. This can be avoided by preparing smarter route planning systems to help limit carbon dioxide emissions. Lastly is number 5, collaborative distribution. In logistics, a driver can find a load from Chicago to San Francisco but have no backhaul, which means a truck driver drives 2,100 miles to San Francisco, drop off a load, and drive all the way back to Chicago with nothing, wasting time, wasting fuel, and producing unneeded carbon emissions. This is no easy fix. Trucking companies could work together to make sure that this truck doesn't go all the way back to Chicago without a load. The interesting fact is that most of these modifications can not only improve carbon efficiency, but improve revenue for firms by cutting down fuel costs. The economy and the environment may at times seem negatively correlated, but it is our job as humans to do whatever we can possible to ensure the future sustainability for our planet. Because no matter what we think, it is a matter of life and death.